Hello everyone. This video will talk about the Marxian theory of economic growth. The video will give information on the creation of the theory, the assumptions of the theory, the laws, and the criticisms of the theory. This theory was given by Karl Heinrich Marx, a German philosopher, economist, and sociologist. Marx's critical theories about society, economics, and politics, collectively understood as Marxism, hold that human societies develop through class conflict. In the capitalist mode of production, this manifests itself in the conflict between the ruling classes, known as the bourgeois, that control the means of production, and the working class, known as the proletariat, that enable these means by selling their labor power in return for wages. His book, Das Kapital, has information about his model of economic growth. He rejects the features of the classical model of economic growth. Then he presents his theory, which has a social and historical framework where economic forces plays an essential role. Marx states that the outcome of the stationary state in the classical model is not a natural process, but rather due to economic activities. The assumptions followed in the model are 1. Wages are determined at the subsistence level of living. 2. Labor is the primary source of value generation. 3. Factors of production are owned by the capitalist. 4. Capital is of two types, constant and variable capital. 5. The economy has perfect competition. And finally, the main assumption that capitalists exploit workers.
The main reason for which Karl Marx put forward the Marxian theory was because around the world, capitalism and its ideologies had divided society into two, the rich and the poor. In the study of capitalism, the production of surplus is a function common to all economic systems. Surplus is the output workers produce that exceeds what the workers themselves consume to sustain their own lives. Since not all people are workers, the production of surplus is necessary. In every economic system, there are some people who produce surpluses and some people who live off the surpluses distributed to them. They themselves do not produce. So, for example, under the cattle slavery, everything the slave produces is for the master. Thus, the cattle slavery, the slave produces the surplus while the master lives off the slave's surplus. In studying capitalism, then, the task for Marxism is to discover how surplus is both produced and distributed under capitalism. In capitalism, the production and distribution of surplus is governed by the relationship between the workers and the capitalists. Like slavery, the relationship between workers and capitalists is defined by exploitation, meaning the workers produce surpluses and capitalists without compensation. A new system called socialism, on the contrary to what many people think and say, socialism doesn't mean government intervention moving from capitalism to socialism. Requires more fundamental shift in the structure of the economy and how work is organized at the workplace, in the home, or whatever work is performed. The goal of socialist economy is to transcend the division between massive people who produce surplus in the tiny minority of people who appropriate the surplus for their own ends. In effect, the goal is to end exploitation and organize the workplace according to democratic and egalitarian principles, one in which the producers of surplus are also the distributors and beneficiaries of surplus themselves, and one in which the decision regarding what, how, when, and where to produce are democratically decided upon by everyone at the workplace.
So now I'll be talking about the four dynamic laws in Marxism. As the Marxian theory talks about how there are only two classes in society, the bourgeois, which are the elite capitalists and the owners, and then the proletariats, which are the working class, and there's a constant conflict between them which will eventually lead to the fall of capitalism and rise of socialism. The four dynamic laws by Karl Marx also basically talk about the same, how their interplay leads to the rise of class conflict and eventual fall of capitalism. The first law is law of capitalistic accumulation. According to this law, the prime desire of the capitalist is to constantly accumulate more and more capital. The second law is law of falling tendency of rate of profit. According to Marx, the profits have a tendency to come down, and that plays an important role in the breakdown of capitalistic economy. So the reason why profits tend to decrease is because, according to Marx, the value of a product lies in labor. So as technology improves, it brings higher profits to the capitalist in the short run. Therefore, they replace labor with machinery, and as laborers only add value, that leads to a fall in the surplus value of a product. Then there's the law of concentration of capital. Marx says that in a capitalist economy, the capital is concentrated and centralized in a few hands. In other words, the growth of capitalism, the cutthroat competition will develop amongst only the capitalists. As a result, the big firms will throw away the small firms, monopolies will grow, and power will be concentrated in a few hands. The final law is the law of increasing pauperization. According to this law, as the capitalism grows, the misery and agonies of labor class increases. It is because of this reason that the laborer are given subsistence wages, and the number of unemployed, which Marx calls the industrial reserve army of labor, increases when the technological changes occur and capital is substituted for laborers. Karl Marx has also developed a few formulas which I'll be explaining now. According to Marx, the value of a commodity denoted by W is given by the sum of C plus Q plus S, where C is the constant capital, which is plant and machinery used in production. Q is variable capital, or the subsistence level of wages paid to the laborers, and S is the surplus value which is earned by laborers but is pocketed by the producers. Then there's a formula for organic composition of capital, which is constant capital upon variable capital. Basically, the total capital employed upon the total wages paid to the laborers. Then there is the formula for rate of exploitation, which is denoted by X, and it is equal to the surplus value upon variable capital, or the subsistence level of wage paid to the laborers. Then there is rate of profit P, which is equal to surplus value upon variable capital plus constant capital.
Karl Marx saw society as clearly structured into two classes and very exploitative, and believed that economic determinism would result in a revolution. There are 5 criticisms of Marxism that I'd like to share. The first point is, the class structure today is more complex than bourgeois and proletariats. In most Western nations, and increasingly in developing nations, there is an extensive middle class who have stocks and shares invested in corporations run by what Marxists would call the capital class. Second point is, capitalism today is less exploitive. An example of the Keynesian economics which moved towards in the direction in which the state came to play a more central role in regulating capitalism